to stay away from the light.
Go into the light.
Stay away from the light. The light is dangerous. Don't go near it. Run to the light, Caroline. Run as fast as you can. Don't even look at the light.
Tell her to go to the light. Tell her not to go into the light. Diane, ask about the light.
You said don't go into the light.
Honey, do you see a light? Do not go into the light.
There is peace and serenity in the light. Do you understand me?
What have you got screwed in there? 300-watt bulb?
Hello, everybody. This is Barry with Sedona Wine and Vortex Tours. And I'm going to do a series of videos on the whole Sedona Vortex phenomenon. We're going to begin today with, are the vortexes real? So that's a big question. And eventually we'll kind of get into my history about how I came to do what I do. And it's all kind of wrapped up into a pretty amazing story that I really want to share because it's a big part of how I came to do the vortex tours that I do. So, but to answer the simple question, are the vortexes real? It's kind of like a yes and no thing. And I hate to be vague on that. I really do. But there's two ways it breaks down. Well, at least two ways. So, I was fascinated with the whole idea of vortexes the first time I heard about it. It's what brought me to Sedona when I was well settled in and running my own business in California after the military. It came up and I had an opportunity to come to Sedona and explore the whole vortex thing. I was a lot younger and tended to believe things with a little less proof than one usually requires when they get older and your filters start working better and your powers of discernment become more refined. So, but I had heard, about the Sedona Vortex phenomena for the first time when a friend of mine gave me a book called Sedona Psychic Energy Vortexes that was written by a man named Dick Sutphen, who owned and operated Valley of the Sun Publishing Company. Later in life, I got to know Dick Sutphen a little bit, not extremely well, but I did get to know him. But I also knew another lady a bit less than I knew Dick Sutphen, and her name was Paige Bryant. Paige Bryant is the one that is most popularly credited with being the, quote, discoverer of the vortex phenomenon in Sedona. So she was a professional psychic living in Phoenix, and as a psychic, she used to channel disembodied extra-dimensional entities. That's what they call channeling. When they speak to you in their own voice that only you hear, and then you transcribe basically the conversation that you have with this disembodied entity. So in this case, she channeled an entity named Albion. And Albion had told Paige Bryant that the earth was going to be subject to biblical scale cataclysmic upheaval, and that most of humanity was going to be wiped out. But Sedona would be a safe place. And if her and her husband moved here from Phoenix, that they would be safe from the cataclysm. But Albion also told her that she would discover the vortexes. So the vortexes, Albion went into some great detail about that. They're, electromagnetic, or they're electric, or they're magnetic, or they're up, down, left, right, male, female, positive, negative, all these different polar attributes to these vortexes that he described to her. So She came here and at some point went around using a dowsing process similar to water witching and located the initial vortex points, which would be Bell Rock, Cathedral Rock, Airport Vortex, and Boynton Canyon. So beyond that, there's no actual scientific evidence of any vortexes that exist in the area. And vortex is a kind of a weird term to use anyway. And it kind of invokes memories of the movie Poltergeist, where, you have this vortex that, the family's being sucked into, or, something like that. Kind of out of a horror movie, science fiction, whatever. But nothing like that exists. Okay, I'll be real straight up honest with you. Okay. So a lot of people talk about vortex energy, but we have to talk about energy here a little bit, because the way the vortex energy is described is either being electric or magnetic or male or female or positive or negative or whatever, or even electromagnetic. Okay, going back to high school science, there was a thing we learned about called the electromagnetic spectrum. The electromagnetic spectrum is a large, long band of all detectable energy that we know about in the universe. Okay? Only a very narrow band in the middle of that electromagnetic spectrum is what we call visible light. And visible light runs a range going from red to violet. So, as you go from red toward the center, you get into like yellow and white. And then from there, going away from the center, you get into like blue and purple. Okay. Now, beyond the red, you have infrared and so on. And beyond the purple or violet, you have ultraviolet and so on. On the red side, the further you go, the more you'll find things like AM, FM radio, television signals, maybe, I'm not sure. I'm going to post it here so you'll see. But on the violet side, the further you go, the more you'll find, energy readings like gamma rays and X-rays and nuclear radiation and things like that. So nowhere on that spectrum or that band or that, long, that spectrum will you find anything called vortex energy. Even though it's described as being electric or magnetic or electromagnetic. So you won't find it there. You cannot go to a vortex energy site with any kind of instrument, put it on the ground, hold it in the air, whatever, and detect vortex energy. It's not there. With regard to energy that does exist that we cannot see or feel, to give you an example, on the infrared side and going further that direction, like I said, we have AM and FM radio. Now, right now where I sit, and television, but right now where I sit, AM, FM radio and television radio waves are passing through my body in every direction. And I can't see it, I can't feel it. However, in this case, for energy that is beyond our normal scope of perception, we need to have an instrument that will make it perceivable. So if I have a television in front of me and I turn that on, I'm going to see and hear television, transmissions. on different frequencies. There's a range there too, and I can switch the channel, and that just, gives me a different frequency, and I see a different show, hear the audio from that. Or if I'm in my car and I want to listen to AM radio, boom, I hit the AM switch, turn on AM radio, rotate the dial up and down the potentiometer, and I will get different channels of radio, but that's audio only. And so if I want to go to and that's amplitude modulation. If I want to go to, FM, frequency modulation, I switch the radio to FM, and now it switches modes, and now I have another band, and I can hear those invisible radio waves that are all around me, going through my car, being picked up by the radio, and, but that's using an instrument to perceive what is otherwise physically imperceptible. Okay? So there's no instrument like that you take to a vortex to detect vortex energy. Now, some people say they can feel it. Others say they can't. Well, okay, I'm not going to deny somebody their experience. But if it's real, then if I'm standing there feeling vortex energy, then the person next to me would feel it too. Because that's the way a radio works, If I turn a radio on, I'm going to hear it. You're going to hear it. Whoever's standing there is going to hear it. But for some reason with vortex energy, when, someone's standing there feeling it, the person standing next to him might not. So I will tell you that I have never felt vortex energy. Other people say they have, and I can't live through their eyes or live their experience. So I just have to, chalk it up to anecdotal evidence, and it's not scientific, but that's what they say. As long as I don't, think they're lying to me, then maybe that's what they really feel. So I have known and used to work for somebody in Sedona who writes a very popular vortex book. His name's Pete Sanders, and he writes a book called Scientific Vortex Information. And it's a good book. He's got his approach to it. I just, worked kind of like office stuff and did data entry for him a long time ago. Never really worked with him on, vortex exploration or anything. But Pete says, he's a really nice guy, just a really likable guy. And I have no reason to, doubt him, but he says I just have never seen his diploma, but he says he's a MIT trained scientist. So in the introduction or first chapter of his book, he says right up front, there's no scientific basis for Sedona Vortex phenomena. So take it from me or take it from him, Now, here's the thing though. I say all that to give you a realistic perspective on the Sedona Vortex phenomenon. But that is not to say that there is not something very real and powerful going on here that so far, at least to me, defies explanation. Other than, to me, the way I've kind of learned to define it, because I don't feel vortex energy, but things happen in the Sedona Vortex that you just wouldn't believe. I'm going to share those with you. And I will be completely honest with you about what happens on my tours sometimes and my experiences in the Sedona, Vortex, quote unquote. But to me, over the many years that Sedona has been regarded as this vortex energy spiritual place, it has caused millions of people from all over the world, mostly North America, but from all over the world, to come to Sedona to have a spiritual experience, just based on this idea that there's vortexes here. So, and I mean millions and millions of people. So I believe, and I can't prove, but when you have such a high concentration of interest and people all going to the same place, basically seeking the same thing, that can create a character and a quality all by itself. And to me, then, in that case, the whole vortex phenomenon has become much more of what I describe as a sociological phenomenon rather than a metaphysical phenomenon or a geomagnetic phenomenon. And the geomagnetic theory comes from the notion or information that there's these giant underground caverns that nobody's ever seen that have gigantic magnetically charged spinning whirlpools of water, which is impossible. And somehow that water spinning either counterclockwise or clockwise projects this magical foo-foo energy up out of the ground, creates these, invisible, intangible vortex shapes of energy that give you metaphysical experiences. Okay. I could say the moon is made of cheese. How many of us are ever going to go to the moon to, take a sample and come back and, put it on a cracker and eat it to, confirm whether that's true or not? So, we're talking about hundreds or thousands of feet down in the earth. It's asinine. And so what prompted this was, I'm in the middle of doing, some SEO work and marketing work on my website to promote my tours. And I'm, rising in the search engine results page. My search engine ranking is going up. So everything I'm doing is working. But, it's like Google, wants, theoretically wants to promote your business or wants you to promote your business and do all these things. And that's going to, raise you up and get you noticed and, attract business to you and, things like that. So then I noticed there's like, kind of a section right above where I'm at on the search engine results. That's like discussions and forums about Sedona Vortexes. So you start clicking that, Reddit mostly. And, it's just everybody and their brother that's got nothing but negative things to say about the vortexes and what a bunch of foo-foo bullshit they are. And I agree with a lot of it. I mean, to be honest with you, it's not great for promoting my business, but okay, it's like, don't waste your money on a vortex tour. And I'm like, no, please waste your money. But it's not a waste of money. And I'll get to that because I do something quite different than what other so-called vortex tour companies do. And I just let you know, I go back with this like 34, 35 years now. I started out driving Jeeps many, many years ago. And, since, Paige Bryant, the Jeep tours have been around since the 60s, I think. And Paige Bryant, whole vortex thing, been around since maybe the 80s. So at some point, all the Jeep tours and all the new companies that came along started doing some version of a vortex tour. And I'll tell you, it really, I trained on those. I never actually did them. I never once, as a Jeep tour driver, took people out to do a vortex tour, but I did go training. So they wanted, anybody that wanted to train, but you didn't have to do vortex tours. So I didn't want to do them. I thought it was a bunch of gaslighting bullshit, to be quite honest with you. And the trainer I was with, I watched her just absolutely flat out lie to people. So, give you an example. I went out on a vortex training, had an older couple. They were really, spiritually curious and, wanted to, see the vortexes. Now, I told you where the 4 main vortex areas are located. Subsequent to that, there's been several more. So you've got the Chapel of the Holy Cross Canyon, you've got Rachel's Knoll, and you got Coxcomb Rock. So altogether, maybe about 7, right? But then all these people started showing up and saying, oh, there's vortexes here and there, and just kind of started making up off the top of their head. Well, the thing about the vortex locations is many of them are inaccessible, especially for tour companies. You can hike to them, but a lot of them are hard to get to. It's a long hike, and, takes a lot of energy and time, and, but you can go. It's just the tour companies can't go there for entirely practical reasons. There's no like Jeep trails or anything that go there. And for, B, they don't issue permits for vehicles to go to the vortex locations. So, you can't get there, and you're not allowed to go there on a commercial tour basis. Now, there are laws that say that the Forest Service that regulates all that is supposed to have a permit issuing scheme. And, they're able to kind of come up with the rules for that on their own. And in the early days, I think there were 1 or 2 vortex tour companies that were grandfathered. But, human impact became kind of a very real consideration. So, they just basically make it impossible to get a permit to do this. So now there's a location that is, I don't know if I want to say the name on the internet, because I just don't want to drive any more traffic there. It's already getting kind of overrun. But, there is a location, and all the tour companies can go there. And it's really nice. It's beautiful. It's absolutely gorgeous. But it is starting, a long time ago, you go there, nobody's there. It's just, people came and went very, sporadically. But now it's just every day. So, and I do take tours there. But it's on private property, more or less. It's a property that is private, but held in a trust, so it has to stay open to the public. And it's a very special place, and the lady that gave it to us, gave it to the public, I mean, she really believed, man. She really thought that was God's favorite place on earth. And so, long story, but anyway, she ended up protecting it. And we can go there. But, I take tours there, and we have a really awesome experience. But I watch the other tours come and go. And, they do the typical thing that the Jeep tour companies do. Okay? They come out, they form a circle with their guests, kind of out in the middle, open space. Then they walk around, wave their hand on the ground, and say, oh, yeah, I feel the energy here. And they have the copper rods, which are like dowsing rods or divining rods. They pass those around, and, people use the divining rods to walk around. And there's 4 things that they can do. They can flop left, they can flop right, they can open up, they can cross. Well, when they cross, that's when you're supposed to be right on top of the vortex. You're right on top of this whirlpool of invisible water that is, charged by some magic, unicorn alien power generator hidden deep within the earth that's spewing up all this vortex energy. And, boom, there's your proof. And then you hand those to the next person, and it doesn't work. And I've literally heard the guides say, well, it doesn't work for everybody, and then take the rods out of their hand, hand them to somebody else. Now, here's the thing, okay, and I've tried to address this before, and I don't mean to be critical, but when you hold these rods, which are essentially L-shaped bent pieces of copper wire, they're on kind of a balance point. And as you walk with them in your hand, they pick up your body movements, and they move certain ways. So, whether they open up or cross or flop left or right, the thing is, they will do the exact same thing walking across your backyard or in the Walmart parking lot. Okay? Nobody said there's any vortexes there. So, you be the judge. I don't want to, say that, it's not real, or these people are stealing your money or whatever. I don't want to say that. But you be the judge. So, I personally, knowing what I know about it, wouldn't spend my money on that. Okay. And yes, I have a business. Yes, I kind of compete. I really kind of don't, because I do such a different thing. But, getting back to my guide trainer, we took this couple out to a spot where nobody has ever said there was a vortex, but there was a Jeep trail there. So, we were permitted to take Jeep tours there. But we parked the Jeep, got out, and this trainer, I don't want to say her name, walked around a open, bare spot on the ground, again, waving her hand around like she's trying to feel something. And, here it is. Here's the vortex energy. Yep, right here. So she calls the woman over to join her and gently grabs her hand, holds it over this bare spot on the ground, and says, "Do you feel it? Do you feel it? Do you feel it?" And the woman goes, "Oh my gosh, yes. Wow, I feel this tingling sensation." "Oh, honey, come here." And her husband comes over. And, the woman takes her husband's hand, holds it over kind of the approximate spot. "Honey, do you feel that? Do you feel that?" And, "Oh, yeah, wow. Oh, I feel that. Yes, I do." Now, I've had people lie to me on my tours and say that they either see or, feel a certain thing, and then they admit they're lying because they were just going along to get along because other people in the group were seeing it. And so, I don't know what the case was here. They both seemed to react to what this woman, my guide trainer, was trying to show them. Now, I don't know what that does for somebody on like a spiritual, metaphysical, healing kind of level, but they said they felt something. And then, we spent some time there doing whatever, we were doing. And then it was time to go. So they got back in the Jeep and I got back in the Jeep. But on my way, when nobody was looking, I walked past that spot and I paused a moment and I kind of held my hand over the ground. I was certainly open to feeling something there, but I didn't feel anything. So I think it was disingenuous. And I think it was gaslighting. And I think you can make people see or feel things that aren't really there if that's what you want to do. So now what I do is different. And my approach to this has developed over literally decades. And while I don't believe that there is scientific evidence or proof of any kind of magical vortex energy in Sedona, like I said earlier, I believe that all the focus on this place has brought something here that is very special and will render very important and life-changing experiences if you're open to it, if you come with the right mindset, if you suspend your skepticism. So I guess briefly before I close, if you see on my website, www.SedonaWineandVortexTours.com, you're going to see my main video on my homepage. And that is a demonstration of my proprietary Prana Viewing Vortex Experience. So we'll get into the history of it and how it developed in subsequent videos. But the video that's there is me with a group of 6 ladies who were on a girls' trip, kind of vacation. They booked my tour. We went to a vortex area. I won't say which one. But it was really funny because I wasn't expecting this, but kind of the group leader, when we were going up the trail to the vortex site, there was a moment where they all paused, and she led the group in like a group kind of meditation. And like, I was like, oh, wow, I wasn't expecting that, but I just kind of quietly stood by, waited for them to finish. But I was kind of tuning in. I mean, they were right next to me, so it was, hard to ignore. But we get to a comfortable spot, and that's where I proceeded to deliver and introduce them to my Prana Viewing Vortex Experience. The only thing is, the prana is a visible phenomenon, and it's nothing that I invented. I think it's a natural phenomenon, like when you see water flowing down a river or a creek or something. It's always been there. And, but we live kind of in our own, frequency band where we can perceive. And like I said, you have to have an instrument to perceive energy that is otherwise imperceptible. However, our bodies are capable of, adjusting at least a little bit so that we can perceive things that are just outside our normal perception. And what I'm talking about is like we're perceptive beings. So we transmit and we receive. And we do that, visually, through feel, through emotion, and all these different ways. But when somebody does like a chemical hallucinogen, or they even drink, or they smoke a little weed, or maybe a prescription drug of some kind. Maybe there's drug-free ways of doing this. Certainly alcohol, can, kind of tweak you a little bit. But I believe our bodies, being the transceivers that they are, can chemically be altered a little bit so that we can just see with a little tweak what is just beyond the narrow, normal band or range of human perception. It's like using the radio as an example, it's like here we are, and the radio has a bandwidth. So I forget what it is, but at AM it's like low 500s to, I think over 1,000, so you got this, range that, in the old cars, or radios, you had a needle that moved across the potentiometer, and you had the low side over here and the high side over here, and you'd get those frequencies, but it maxed out either to the high side or the low side. Well, when you drink a little alcohol, or like, smoke a little weed, or, do some kind of other drug, particularly like a powerful hallucinogen, I think your needle goes a little bit outside that bandwidth, and you perceive things that are normally just on or outside your range of normal perception temporarily. And then the chemical wears off, and, boop, you come back into the normal range. So, but if it's a good experience, which I hope it always is, but, you should be changed a little bit by that, especially if it's a very powerful experience. That's why they do ayahuasca ceremonies in South America or Central America, wherever they do those, But ayahuasca is a powerful hallucinogen that is based on the compound DMT, which is actually produced and secreted by your pineal gland inside your brain. And we're going to get way into that, okay? Because I believe that is, I'm just going to tease this out a little bit, the trans-dimensional interface that kind of links the physical body and the spiritual body. So, but it could be the center of your actual thought, emotion, and experience, So, but we'll get more into that later. It's just that I guess I'll close with, answering the question, are the vortexes real? And the answer to that is maybe, or yes and no. It's a question, the answer of which really needs to be qualified. But in a strictly scientific sense, the answer is very clearly no. But in a sociological sense, very strongly, probably. So, and with that, I'll close and start trying to work up material for part 2 of this. So thanks for tuning in. You're going to get links and graphics and pictures and stuff you can click on. And my website is SedonaVortexTours.com. This is, to me, becoming, and has been for a long time, about much more than just doing tours and driving traffic to my website and booking tours. This is becoming my life's passion and my legacy and my great big body of work, that I want to kind of share with the world. So hopefully you enjoy it. Hopefully you get a lot out of it. Believe me, we're going to get really, 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 really deep into this. And if you're a spiritual seeker and somebody that's looking for, the answers to spirituality and our lives and our place in the universe and how we manifest change, then this is probably going to be at least a really good channel for you to stay in touch with. So until next time, visit my website if you're curious. And thanks for tuning in.